kind of blown away. This guy is amazing. David Shirk. How are you holding up? Now, Variety wrote a story in 1996 that Peter Jackson was making The Frighteners, and there were 500 visual effects shots in that movie. And that was a mind blower. It was, how many visual effects shots were in this movie, do you know?
Actually, I'm not sure what the total was, but for ILM it was 900, which is actually a really low number these days, but Steven likes very long shots, and some of the shots in this movie were extremely long.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to tell who Steven is? I mean, I think they know.
That would be Steven Spielberg, our director.
Yeah, didn't want to be a name dropper. But he has a reputation of doing things faster than anybody else can. And the results are obviously great. But what does he do? How long did you work on the film?
I was on the film for about 2.5 years.
And so, you know, again, visual effects used to be post-production, but you started like really early on?
We started very early on. We created some pitch material that we showed when we were trying to be considered to be the visual effects team on the movie. We showed some visual ideas, some of which actually showed up in the final film. One of the big ones was the way that Kong was introduced, for instance. That one survived pretty much through to the end. And the film was still under heavy development at that time, and we were invited to be involved in that process to help with the pre-visualization of the film, which he was doing simultaneous with Zach Penn writing the script. So a lot of times, you know, things Zach would write would feed into what we were doing, and the rest of the pre-vis team that was led by Scott Meadows at Digital Domain, and then sometimes visual ideas would come out of that creative process of the pre-visualization, and he would say, oh, this is great. Artemis has to turn to Parzival here and say something like this, and he'd just rattle off a line a couple of times, and then Zach would take that and write that into the dialogue, and it was because of that synthesis of the way the film was developed visually and in the writing simultaneously that I think kind of made it special.
Well, also, there's two worlds in the film. Is it Cleveland?
Yeah.
2045, and the fantasy world of Oasis. So when you started, did Steven Spielberg say, here's what I want more than anything, here's what I don't want more than anything?
Generally, he was always pretty clear with us, but I'd say that the road in some ways was pretty clear at the beginning of the movie, just in terms of, well, what's it going to be? And we spent a lot of time talking about just ideas and say, well, what's the vocabulary? What's the grammar of this film? What does it look like when somebody in the real world is browsing menus looking for a song to play? What does their character do in the Oasis? Do they kind of go slack-faced, you know, all of a sudden? We would just talk about these rules and what does it look like when somebody opens their inventory and is searching for something. So there were a lot of ideas in the film that were kind of developed and discovered along the way.
Yeah.
And he was so extremely collaborative and generous in the process of allowing everyone's voice to be heard. And I think it's one of the reasons why the film is just so rich, because he made that opportunity available, and it went all through the crew. I mean, there are visual ideas in the film that came from people low down in the visual effects crew who said, I have an idea, I love this character, let's try this. And we would pitch it to Steve, and he's like, let's do it, and it's in the film.
And there's so many references to pop culture, whether it's Jurassic Park or King Kong. You know, I mean, were these all legally cleared before you started working, or was it like a race against time?
It was an ongoing process. It was an evolution. You know, we would look at boards, and I'd see something on the board and get really excited. It's like, oh, I can't believe that's going to be in the film, and then, oh, it wasn't in the film. That happened a few times, but things were getting added right up to the end. We would have beats in the film where we said, you know, we need something special here, and we would pitch ideas. Ideas would come from all over the place, and you know, people would make suggestions. Steven would pick something. We'd try to get it cleared. If it cleared, it would go into the film. There were some very late additions for us where we were actually taking more or less finished shots, and we were replacing characters with different characters just to kind of keep the population where we wanted it.
I mean, this sounds like incredibly complicated.
It was. I like to joke with people that some days I felt like my job was 60% creative and 40% traffic control. There was a huge amount of details just to keep track of everything, and we would try to go through a process with Stephen where we would refine the ideas and say, look, we put up boards and said, here's a sequence. We've got this set of characters for this sequence, this set for this sequence, and then the rest of the film was just juggling and balancing all of those elements with him.
Yeah, but it all works. I mean, it's you know, as we used to say when I was at UCSB, it blows your mind. Seriously, congratulations on this, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.